Happy Thursday, everybody. My name is Ptony, your friendly Catholic vlogger. This is a sensitive story, go figure. Prayed about it and decided to share it with you. Please don't ask me who fired me, I won't tell you. But here's the story. Once upon a time, I moved to, let's say, Colorado, and it was exciting. I was chasing my dreams. I had a great job and I loved the work that I was doing. It was very meaningful. It was a social activism job. There was a high emphasis on creating atmospheres of dialogue, and my specific role was to find different young adult communities and coach them in some of these issues, mentor them, provide resources, provide moral support. That's all very abstract. That's because I'm trying to avoid giving enough clues so that anyone could figure out who I'm talking about. But take my word for it, this was a big step in my life. So from day one, I'm dedicated to this job. So excited for it. Worked really hard, worked weekends. We had some events coming up. This was a very busy time of year when I started. Boxes to pack, and there were bags to stuff, and there was logistics to organize, and there was car rentals to arrange, and there was just lots of things to do. And so I worked really hard, and the whole team worked really hard. Say what you want about this group of people that fired me. It's made up of a group of people that work very, very hard. I worked so hard that within the first month, I had joined as temporary staff, and I was promoted to full-time regular staff. And I was excited. I mean, this temporary thing was supposed to be a 6-month trial period, and within a month we had decided that I would work full-time. Now, as the weeks progressed, ultimately this is a story of burnout. I worked a lot of weekends. And I'm not against working weekends, especially when the work that I'm doing is something that is meaningful to me on such a personal level. I mean, and I'm dancing around how exactly it was personal to me, but it was. The challenge is that even with all of the heart in the world, I just have limitations. I can't keep on going at a certain point. I think my first red flag where I started to notice that I was running out of steam was when I was sent on a business trip up to, let's say, Michigan. And I hopped on a plane and I was going to help somebody out there. And while I was on the plane, I fainted. Leading up to this plane trip, I hadn't been eating very well. When I get stressed, when I'm working really hard, I forget to eat. That continues to be a problem in my life. I lose my appetite, and I don't want to eat food because food is a hassle. On this specific plane trip, being up at a high altitude with not as much nourishment going through my body as I should really be giving myself, I started to feel very lightheaded. I wasn't entirely sure what was going on at the time. I just knew that something was wrong, and I felt a cold sweat come over me. I had tried eating earlier that day, but I had no appetite, and it's really hard to force down food when I have no appetite, especially when every meal is something where I have no appetite. I decide to go to the bathroom and just splash some water on my face. Maybe that will help. So I stand up, I start walking towards the bathroom, and everything starts to go black. I was still walking at this point, and I wasn't entirely sure which way up was, but I could sort of tell that I was beginning to fall forward. And of course, ever the rational human being that I am, what do? Well, I speed up my feet so that my feet can get underneath me again. I tripped, and I fell, and I hit my head on an armrest. And I was on the floor of the plane. Lying there on the floor, I maintained consciousness, and the guy that was in that seat that I fell right next to just happened to be a doctor. Thank you, Lord. So he asked me some questions, and eventually we determined that probably what was going on was I wasn't eating or drinking enough. It was just, exhaustion from not giving myself proper fuel. So the flight crew was very accommodating. They cleared out an aisle of seats so that I could have it all to myself. And then I half lay down across the seats, and they gave me some food to eat and helped me, recover a little bit. Eventually we landed on the other end, and I had hit my head on the armrest, and I needed stitches. So the person picking me up, I was supposed to help him with a project on that end, and instead he took me to the hospital. I kind of pushed back our calendar of events a little bit because I needed stitches on my face. So that was a red flag. I ended up paying for those stitches with my own insurance, which in hindsight, I should have asked about. That was a business trip. Shouldn't the business pay for that? But that was certainly a red flag that I was running low on energy. Mostly ignored it though, because I'm stubborn, and I decided just to eat more. But the thing is that more signs came up. I distinctly remember one time when I was driving late at night, and I came up to a red light, and for whatever reason in my mind I thought it was a stop sign, and so I stopped and then started going again. And then I recognized, wait, no, this isn't a stop sign. This is a stop light. I shouldn't be doing this. And so I let up on the gas. And I remember sitting there for a solid 10 seconds, not being able to process what was going on, which was very strange for me. I'm absent-minded. I get distracted. But when I'm trying to figure out what's going on, I'm very intuitive. Usually I come to my conclusions quickly. There I just froze. I felt like I couldn't process. Something was missing. That was unusual and definitely a red flag. There was another business trip that I went on, and I had a lot of fun on this business trip. I was gallivanting across a region of the country. The road trip came to an end, and I was starting to journey back home. And for whatever reason, the last leg of my journey, when I was driving home, the event that day that I was driving home from, it was pushed back into a little later in the day than had been expected. And then also there was a blizzard that came in. I mean, it wasn't a blizzard, but it was definitely snow, and forced me to take the roads much slower than had been originally planned. And drastically slower. I mean, I was only able to drive at about 2/3 the speed of the speed limits. So I contacted my boss and said, hey, this is what's going on. What should we do? And she said, well, hey, if you want, you can stop at a hotel. And I said, well, if it's all the same to you, I'd rather drive home tonight and just get all the driving out of the way. I think I can make it. I trust myself to make it. So she said, okay, if you feel safe doing that, yeah, you can do that. But there's a little bit of a communication fall through, because I was assuming that I would be able to sleep in a little bit in the morning, and it turned out that that wasn't going to be the case. I got home really late. I got about 4 hours of sleep, and then it was time for me to return the car rental to the car rental agency, which I was not happy about. I mean, if I had known that pushing through the late hours of the night so that I could get up early-ish relative to when I went to sleep and drive a car to the car rental agency, I would not have done that. I would have stayed at a hotel, and I would have slept in a little bit, because, you know, every once in a while it feels good to sleep in, especially after working weekend after weekend after weekend. But the topic wasn't open for discussion, so off I went to drop off the car rental, and another coworker came with another car, so that when I dropped the car off, then, you know, I had transportation back. By the time we got to the car rental, my coworker asked me if I was doing okay, because 3 times it looked like I was going to get into an accident. You know, like turning right on red when I really didn't have the space to turn right on red. Merging lanes when there wasn't an opening to merge into. Did anybody get hurt? No, my guardian angel is working overtime. But yeah, it was pretty obvious that I wasn't all there. I was tired and I was angry. By this point, working for this company, some of the magic of doing this really meaningful work kind of wore off. I had kind of grown accustomed to it. And then I was asked to work another weekend. There was a conference in LA, and someone who had been working for the company recently for a little bit, but then was let go, was going to attend that conference and run a table there. But since that guy wasn't around anymore, we needed a replacement. And so, of course, that was going to be me? Question mark, question mark. At this point, with all of the red flags going on, I went to my supervisor and I said, hey, look, this LA trip, I can do it. But I also need you to know that I'm starting to get tired, and I kind of need some time to rest at some point. My supervisor didn't seem to take that very well. Her brows furrowed, and her lips pursed, and she said, okay, I'll try to find somebody else. And ultimately she did find somebody else, which was nice. And so I had a weekend, which was actually a weekend. But also, for all the red flags that I had seen so far, this was the biggest. Because now I began to wonder, wait, am I going to be able to talk to my supervisor about making sure that I don't work myself to death? Like, can I go to my supervisor and say, hey, I need to slow down for a little bit? Is she going to get defensive if I say that? From there, things took an increasingly nasty turn. The supervisor that I had approached about the LA trip wasn't my direct supervisor. She was one above. So I went and I talked to my direct supervisor and I said, hey, I need to talk to you about this. This happened and it made me feel very uncomfortable. I saw these signs and I felt like my supervisor had gotten defensive over this. And that's a problem for me, because I need to know that I need to feel safe bringing my supervisor things like this. Things like, I feel like I'm being overworked and I can't keep going at this rate. Things like, I don't feel safe with this workload. I think that my health is in jeopardy and I could end up in a car crash, especially because this company has had car crashes before. This isn't new ground for them. Well, that conversation didn't go well either. As I tell this story, of course, I was a little more heated in most of these conversations than I am now, and I'm painting myself as very reasonable and level-headed. I don't think that that's entirely fair to paint things like that. Not that we got into a screaming match, but it was definitely a much more impassioned conversation on both sides. At a certain point, the two supervisors, my direct supervisor and the one above her, asked me if I wanted to leave, if I thought that maybe this company wasn't the right fit. And I mean, I'm stubborn. I said, no, I want to figure out a way to make this work. I spent Easter break reading a book called Crucial Conversations, which is all about trying to resolve, well, differences that can cause a lot of tension, especially in a work environment. I was dedicated to trying to figure out some way to work things out, and so I arranged with my direct supervisor. I said, can we talk? And we talked some things through, and I feel like we made progress, but it also became increasingly apparent that there were a lot of things that just needed to be worked through. So a couple hours after that conversation, her supervisor came to my desk with a piece of paper, and she said, I need you to sign this. We're going to let you go. I've never been fired before. I didn't exactly know what to do. I signed the paper. My housing was tied up with this company that I was working for, and I lost that effective immediately. I had 3 hours to move out. They gave me a hotel room to stay that night. They said that they would book that hotel room wherever I wanted, whether that was the first leg of the journey back towards home or whether that was in the area, and I chose something in the area. Part of that contract that I signed stipulated that I'm not allowed to defame this company, which is a big part of the reason why I don't. I mean, I'm not just telling you their name, period. That's not open to negotiation. But also, this company, for all the things they did to me, they do a lot of good work that is meaningful. I think they have internal problems, and hopefully those will get worked through. It was a really hard experience, and one that's shaped me in ways that are very far-reaching. I continue to discover things about myself that didn't used to be there before this company. It was an experience of disillusionment. It was an experience of really feeling betrayed. It was an experience of being worked to my limits and discovering that my limits were, I don't have the same capacity for work that I thought I did. It's changed how I view and how I relate to things like burnout, things like the distinction between personal and professional life, also things like trust, also things like how do I relate to my employer, or how do I relate to anybody over me? How do I relate to people that have an expectation to my time, even just friends that expect me to hang out with them? That's all changed. That's all changed. If I were put into a similar situation again in the future, I would act differently. I would recognize that maybe, sometimes there are battles out there that aren't mine to fight. And when there are red flags, sometimes the best decision is to walk out, discreetly and in a way that hopefully doesn't burn bridges. But red flags are not something that I should ignore. Red flags are very real, and I continue to process it, and I don't have a moral for this story. This is just me telling a story that's closer to my heart. Whew, well, okay. Next week will probably be a lighter week. Till then, you're in my prayers. Please pray for me. God bless and ciao. So, funny little addendum from last week. Last week I talked about how I'm going to start tithing again. I'll put a link to that video. Just follow the upside down exclamation point in the top right of your browser. That should be that way. Am I pointing the right way? Maybe it's this way. I'm pretty sure it's this way. Directions are confusing with the camera. But anyways, so I budgeted out the month of November, and I went to October to see what sort of income I had and to see what I would tithe this month. And I discovered I didn't actually have any income in October. So tithing this month is rather easy. I do have some income for November, so I'll tithe in December, I suppose. I can start tithing for Lent. I mean, not Lent, for Advent. It'll be great. It'll be a great time. All right, that's all I got. I'll see you later. Bye.